I'm Myra Townsend. I'm 34. Last Tuesday, I came home from work and found a moving truck parked in my driveway. My parents were standing on my front lawn, and my brother was carrying boxes toward my front door, like he already lived there. My mother looked me in the eye and said, "He has children, Myra. You're single. You don't need all this space." She said it loud enough for the whole street to hear. My father stood behind her with his arms crossed, nodding, like this was settled, like I was a tenant in my own life and they'd just decided not to renew my lease. What they didn't realize is that I have security cameras, and those cameras had been recording everything, including what the three of them did last Thursday while I was at work. Before I take you through this story, if it speaks to you, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with it. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Now let me take you back to 3 years ago, when I first bought this house, and why my family never believed it was really mine. I started at Morrison and Hale Construction the summer after college. 22 years old, steel-toed boots that gave me blisters for the first 3 months, a hard hat 2 sizes too big. Junior site engineer, lowest rung. 8 years later, I was a project manager running commercial builds across 2 counties. I earned that title the same way I earned everything else in my life, by showing up, staying late, and never once asking my family for a dollar. The house was a 3-bedroom Cape Cod on Maple Lane in Ridgewood. White siding, black shutters, a porch that wrapped around the left side. Listed at $220. I put down $44,000, 20% cash, from savings I'd built since my first paycheck. The mortgage was mine, the insurance was mine. Every single payment came from my account, and my account alone. The day I signed the deed, I sat in my car in the title company parking lot and called my parents. My hands were still shaking from the pen. "Mom, I bought a house." Silence. Then, "That's nice, honey. Kyle's having a rough time with Heather, you know. We're worried about the kids." I remember staring at the steering wheel. The ink on my signature wasn't even dry, and already I'd been shuffled aside. I told her the address. She said she'd come see it soon. That was 3 years ago. My parents have never visited. Not once. They've never seen the porch I repainted, the garden I built along the back fence, the kitchen I retiled on weekends with my own hands. But they knew exactly how many bedrooms it had. They always knew that. My brother Kyle is 4 years older than me. Growing up, that gap felt more like 40. Kyle got the first car, a used Chevy Blazer, paid for by Dad the week he turned 16. I got a bus pass. Kyle's first apartment after college, Dad covered the deposit and the first 3 months of rent. When I graduated, Dad said, "You're smart, Myra. You'll figure it out." And I did figure it out. That was the problem. Every time I handled things on my own, it confirmed their belief that I didn't need help. Meanwhile, Kyle drifted from job to job. 6 in 10 years. Sales associate, warehouse supervisor, insurance adjuster, landscaping crew. Each one ended the same way. A boss who didn't get him, a coworker who had it out for him, a system that was rigged. Never Kyle's fault. Never once. He married Heather when he was 28. They had Emma, now 8, and Liam, now 6. Good kids, sweet kids, kids who deserved a stable father, which is probably why Heather filed for divorce last year. She got primary custody. Kyle got every other weekend, and a mountain of resentment he aimed at everyone except himself. My parents blamed Heather. "She tore this family apart," Mom said at Thanksgiving, right across the table from me, like I was furniture. Dad nodded. "A man needs support from his wife. She gave up on him." Nobody asked why Heather gave up. Nobody asked about the unpaid bills, the maxed credit cards, the mornings Kyle didn't bother getting out of bed. Those details didn't fit the story my parents had been telling themselves for 38 years. That Kyle was golden, and the world just kept letting him down. 2 weeks before the moving truck, my mother called me. That call changed everything. It was a Wednesday evening. I was scraping paint off the bathroom window frame when my phone buzzed on the counter. Mom. Myra, we've been thinking. Those 4 words have never once led to anything good in my family. Kyle needs a place. Heather's keeping the apartment and he's been staying with us, but your father's back can't handle the couch situation much longer. She paused. Your house has 3 bedrooms and it's just you. It makes sense. I set the paint scraper down. No, Mom, that's my house. I'm not saying forever, just until he gets on his feet. He's been getting on his feet for 15 years. Silence. Then the shift. I could hear it in her breathing, the slight catch before the guilt kicked in. So you'd let your niece and nephew be homeless? Emma and Liam live with Heather. They have a home. They need their father nearby, and Kyle needs space for them on his weekends. You have 3 bedrooms, Myra. 3. For one person. I heard the phone shuffle. Dad's voice, deeper, harder. Don't be selfish, Myra. Family helps family. I help plenty, Dad. I'm not giving away my house. Nobody's asking you to give it away. We're asking you to share. You're asking me to move out of my own home so Kyle can move in. We're asking you to think about someone other than yourself for once. I closed my eyes, took a breath. The answer is no. The line went dead. Not a goodbye, not a let's talk later. Just silence, then dial tone. I stood there in my half-scraped bathroom, paint flakes on my shoes, and told myself that was the end of it. I was wrong. A week passed. No calls from Mom, no texts, no passive-aggressive Bible verses forwarded at 6 a.m., which was her usual method of letting me know she was disappointed without technically saying it. Nothing. If you've grown up in a family like mine, you know that silence is never neutral. Silence from my mother is never peace. It's planning. I told myself I was overthinking it. I went to work. I ran my project reviews. I ate lunch at my desk and went home to a quiet house on a quiet street and pretended the knot in my stomach was just stress. On Thursday, my coworker Rob found me staring at a spreadsheet I hadn't touched in 20 minutes. You good? He leaned against the partition of my cubicle, coffee in hand. Family stuff. The brother thing? I'd told Rob about Kyle a few weeks back. Not everything. Just enough. He was the closest thing I had to a best friend at work. It manager, dry sense of humor, zero tolerance for nonsense. They asked me to give him my house, Rob. He blinked. Give him your house. 3 bedrooms, just me, makes sense, apparently. And you said no. I said no. Then it's done. Yeah. I turned back to the spreadsheet. Yeah, it's done. It wasn't done. That afternoon, sitting in a project status meeting, my phone lit up with a notification. I glanced down. Ring camera. Motion detected at front door. I was 15 miles away, sitting in a conference room full of contractors debating foundation specs. I couldn't check right then. The meeting ran another 40 minutes. By the time I pulled it up, the notification had been sitting there for almost an hour. I should have looked sooner. I opened the Ring app in the parking lot after work, my truck still running, heater blasting against the November chill. The footage was time-stamped 2:07 p.m. Kyle, standing on my front porch, alone. He looked around, left, right, over his shoulder, like a man who knew he wasn't supposed to be there. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a key. My spare key, the one I gave my parents 2 years ago for emergencies. In case there's a fire, I'd said. In case something happens to me. He slid it into the lock. The door opened, and my brother walked into my house like he was shopping for curtains. The camera caught 12 minutes of footage. Kyle moved through every room. He opened closets. He checked the water pressure in the bathroom. He stood in the master bedroom doorway for a long time, phone out, recording video. Panning left to right, measuring the space with his eyes. He was taking inventory. Of my home. Of my life. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I watched him walk through my kitchen, running his hand along the countertop I'd installed myself. He opened my refrigerator. And looked inside like he was deciding what groceries to buy. Then he left, locked the door behind him, drove away. I called him. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I sat in that parking lot for 10 minutes, engine running, replaying the footage. My own brother, walking through my house, filming my rooms like a real estate agent preparing a listing. And the key? My parents gave him that key. They didn't ask. They just handed over access to my home like it was theirs to give. I called my mother that night. No small talk. Did you give Kyle my spare key? A pause. Just a beat too long. He wanted to see if the house would work for the kids. Work for the kids. Mom, it's my house. You're being dramatic, Myra. In the background, Dad. Just let him look, for God's sake. Let him look? He changed nothing this time, but he walked through every room with a camera. Did you send him to do that? Mom's voice tightened. We're trying to solve a problem. Your brother is sleeping on our couch. He has 2 children who need a bedroom when they visit. You have space. I don't understand why this is so complicated. Because it's mine. I bought it. I pay for it. My name is on every document. And family means nothing? Family means you don't sneak into someone's home while they're at work. She went quiet. I could hear the TV in the background, some game show, applause and bells. Dad muttered something I couldn't catch. Then Mom, softer now, the voice she uses when she's recalibrating. He was just looking, sweetheart. Nobody's doing anything without your permission. But that was a lie. I'd watched the footage. I'd seen Kyle test the key, check every room, record every angle. That wasn't a casual visit, that was reconnaissance. And my parents had authorized it. They'd already decided. The only thing left was to get me out of the way. I hung up, sat on my couch, in my living room, in my house, and stared at the wall. I didn't change the locks that night. Part of me wanted to. But a bigger part of me wanted to see exactly how far they were willing to go. The next Thursday, it happened again. Same time slot, early afternoon, when I'm always on site. This time, my phone buzzed during a concrete pour. I stepped away from the crew and checked immediately. Ring notification. Person detected. Front door. I opened the live feed. Gerald Townsend, Donna Townsend, Kyle Townsend, all 3 of them. On my porch, Dad had the spare key out. He unlocked the door. Kyle followed him in, carrying a plastic bag from the hardware store. Mom stayed on the porch for a moment, glancing up and down the street, then stepped inside and closed the door behind her. I stood on a construction site 15 miles away, watching my family enter my home without my permission. My phone was shaking. No, my hands were shaking. The interior camera in the hallway picked up Kyle kneeling at the front door with a screwdriver. He had a new lock set, deadbolt and knob, brass finish, still in the packaging. He was removing my lock, replacing it with a new one. My father stood over him, arms crossed, supervising. Like this was just another project. Like they were fixing a leaky faucet. Mom moved through the house carrying a cardboard box. She set it in the second bedroom. I watched her pull out a small stuffed bear, a folded blanket with cartoon dinosaurs, a pair of tiny rain boots. She arranged them on the floor near the closet. They were setting up a children's room. In my house. While I was at work. I screenshot everything. I saved every clip. My hands hadn't stopped trembling, but my mind was perfectly clear. I watched my father carry my niece's teddy bear into my living room like he owned the place. 14 minutes of footage. Every second recorded, every face visible. Janet Calloway has lived next door to me since I moved in. 68 years old, retired real estate attorney, silver hair she keeps in a low bun, and a stare that could cross-examine you from across a fence line. She was pruning her hydrangeas when I pulled into my driveway that evening. I must have looked like I'd been through something, because she set down her shears and walked over before I even closed my truck door. Myra, what happened? I showed her the footage right there in my driveway. She watched it twice without saying a word. Then she looked up at me over her reading glasses. This is criminal trespass. They used a key without your current consent, entered your home, and changed the locks. In this state, that's a Class A misdemeanor at minimum. They're my parents, Janet. And that's your house, Myra. She handed my phone back. Here's what you do. First, don't confront them yet. Let the evidence accumulate. Second, save every second of that footage somewhere they can't reach. Cloud storage, external drive, both. Third, call a locksmith tonight. Get every lock changed. And fourth, if they come back, you call the police and file a formal trespass warning. A trespass warning against my own parents. A trespass warning against 3 adults who entered your property without authorization and changed your locks. The family part is their problem. The legal part is yours. She squeezed my arm. Her hand was small and warm and steady. Honey, love doesn't come with a right to your door locks. I nodded, went inside, called the locksmith. But I kept thinking about what Janet said, that a trespass warning is public record. In a town the size of Ridgewood, public record means everybody knows. The locksmith arrived at 7:30. Mike, from Ridgewood Hardware. He'd done work on 3 of my construction projects. When I showed him my deed and ID, he didn't ask questions. Just nodded and got to work. Front door, back door, garage side entry. New deadbolts, new knobs, new keys. 3 sets, all mine. Somebody put a fresh lock on this front door recently, Mike said, holding up the hardware Kyle had installed. Cheap brass, still shiny. This isn't the original. I know. He looked at me for a second, then finished the job without another word. I paid him in cash and he left. I found Kyle's box in the second bedroom. The stuffed bear. The dinosaur blanket. The tiny rain boots lined up against the wall. I picked everything up carefully, carried it to the garage, and set it on the workbench. I didn't throw anything away. These were my niece's and nephew's things. I wasn't angry at the children. I added a second camera, a small one covering the back door, and tested the feeds on my phone. Every angle covered, every entry point monitored. Then I sat on my porch in the dark. I pulled up the footage from that afternoon one more time. I'd watched it 6 times already, but there was one moment I kept coming back to. It was near the end, just before they left. Mom was standing in my hallway, and she said something to Kyle. The audio was faint, but I turned the volume all the way up and pressed my phone to my ear. She'll get over it. She always does. I set the phone down on my knee and looked out at the empty street. My mother's voice, recorded in my own hallway, telling my brother that my feelings didn't matter, that they never had. Friday morning, 6:42 a.m. The family group chat, the one Mom created 3 Christmases ago that nobody ever leaves because leaving it would be a slap in the face, lit up with a message from Donna Townsend. Please pray for our family. Myra is refusing to help her brother and his children in their time of need. We have asked her with love, and she has responded with selfishness. Please keep us in your prayers. 13 people in that chat. Aunts, uncles, cousins, my grandmother's sister. People who send me birthday cards and see me at Easter. The replies started coming within the hour. Aunt Linda. Oh, Donna, I'm so sorry. Family should stick together. Uncle Steve. That's a shame. Kyle's been through enough. Cousin Rachel texted me privately. Hey, what's going on? Your mom seems really upset. I didn't respond to any of it. I opened each message, read it, and saved it. Screenshots, everyone. Then Kyle texted me directly. Come on, Myra, it's just a house. I have kids. Just a house. 8 years of overtime, every dollar tracked, every sacrifice weighed. Just a house. I put the phone face down on the counter and made coffee. I drank it slowly. I went to work. I ran a site inspection and approved a framing schedule and ate a sandwich at my desk at noon. At 4:15, one more message from Mom. Group chat again. We're coming over Saturday with the moving truck. This is happening whether Myra likes it or not. Kyle and his children deserve a stable home. I read it 3 times. Then I locked my phone and drove home. Saturday was tomorrow. They were actually going to show up with a truck, and they expected me to step aside. They didn't know me at all. I'm going to pause here for a second. If you're watching this, and you've ever had your family treat your no like a suggestion, like your boundaries were just inconvenient, I need you to hit that subscribe button. Not for me. For every person watching this who needs to hear that your no is a complete sentence. And if you've been through something like this, tell me in the comments. What did they try to take from you? I read every single one. Okay, Saturday came, and they actually showed up. Friday afternoon, I went next door. Janet had coffee waiting. She always does. She keeps a pot warm until 5, claims it's for herself, but there are always 2 mugs out. We sat on her screened porch. The air smelled like wet leaves and wood smoke from somewhere down the block. I told her about the group chat message, about the moving truck coming Saturday. Janet stirred her coffee and didn't speak for a long time. Then she said, "My brother tried to take my parents' house after they passed. 1994. I had to go to court. Won, eventually. But the worst part wasn't the court." What was the worst part? Accepting that my brother didn't see me as a sister. He saw me as something standing between him and what he wanted. I stared into my mug. She'd just described my entire family in one sentence. "Janet, if they show up tomorrow, then you have every right to call the police. You own that property outright. They have no legal claim, no lease, no verbal agreement. If they refuse to leave, it's trespassing. And if I file a trespass warning, it goes on public record. This is Ridgewood, population 9,000. People will know." She looked at me over her glasses. "But people already know, Myra. Your mother's been broadcasting on that group chat. You're not the one who made this public." She set down her coffee. "Sunday is your dad's birthday, right? At the church hall?" I nodded. "You don't have to go. But if you do, bring facts. Because your mother will have the story already shaped before you walk through that door." I drove home and sat in my driveway for a while, watching the porch light flicker on at dusk. The people who love you don't need a court order to respect your door. Janet had said that. I kept hearing it. Rob met me at the diner on Franklin Street. Friday night, vinyl booths, coffee that tastes like it was brewed during the Carter administration. We'd been meeting here every couple of weeks since I started at Morrison and Hale. No agenda, just food and honesty. I showed him the footage on my phone. He watched it without blinking. Then he set the phone down and looked at me the way he looks at server logs that don't add up. "That's breaking and entering. It's my family. It's your house. Those 2 things aren't the same." He took a bite of his burger, chewed, and pointed a fry at me. "Have you backed this up?" "It's on my Ring cloud." "That's 1 copy. If something happens to your account or someone figures out your password, gone." He pulled out his laptop bag. "Give me your phone for 5 minutes." He backed the footage to 2 separate cloud drives and copied it to a USB stick he had in his bag. IT guys carry USB sticks, the way other people carry breath mints. "There," he said. 3 copies. Nobody deletes this. "Rob, I'm not trying to build a criminal case." "I know." He wiped his hands on a napkin. "But if they deny everything at your dad's birthday, if your mom tells the whole church you're lying, you have the video." "I'm not going to ambush my father at his birthday party." "I didn't say ambush. I said, if they lie, you have the truth." He opened his laptop and installed AirPlay on my phone so I could cast to any screen nearby. "Just in case you need to show it on something bigger than a 5-inch screen." I smiled for the first time in days. "I won't need that," he shrugged. "Sure you won't." Saturday morning, 8:45. I sat on my porch with a mug of coffee, watching the street. The air was cool and still, one of those late autumn mornings where the light hits the trees at a low angle and everything looks golden and calm and temporary. I'd slept maybe 3 hours. I'd already checked every lock twice. The cameras were on. My deed was in the folder on the kitchen counter, next to my ID and my mortgage statement. At 9:02, I heard it before I saw it. The low grinding rumble of a truck engine turning onto Maple Lane. Then the hiss of air brakes. A U-Haul box truck, the 14-foot kind, pulled up to the curb in front of my house. Kyle was behind the wheel. Behind the U-Haul, my father's gray Ford F-150. Dad driving. Mom in the passenger seat, sunglasses on, purse in her lap like she was arriving at church. I didn't move. I sat on my porch and watched them park. Kyle killed the engine and climbed out. He walked to the back of the U-Haul and rolled up the gate. Inside, furniture, a bed frame, boxes stacked 3 high, a children's bicycle with training wheels, a lamp, a microwave. He'd packed a household, an entire household. Dad got out of the truck. He stretched his back, looked at the house, my house, and adjusted his belt. He walked toward the porch with the posture of a man who expects to be obeyed. "All right, Myra, let's not make this difficult." Down the street, Janet had just come outside with her garden hose. She stood on her driveway, watching. Across the street, Mrs. Henderson was retrieving her mail. The Martinez couple next door paused in the middle of loading their kids into a minivan. Mom stepped out of the truck. She looked at me like I was the problem. And then she said the thing that changed everything. My mother straightened her jacket, walked to the center of the lawn, my lawn, and spoke in that voice she uses at church potlucks, the one that carries, the one designed to be overheard. "Myra, don't embarrass yourself. He has children. You're alone. This house is wasted on you." The word landed like a slap. Wasted, not underused, not more than you need. Wasted. As if my life in this house, the years of work, the mortgage payments, the weekends spent retiling and repainting and building something with my own hands, counted for nothing because I hadn't produced grandchildren. Mrs. Henderson set her mail down and stood still on her porch. The Martinez family stopped loading their minivan. Janet turned off her garden hose. Dad walked up the path and stood next to Mom. "We raised you. We gave you everything. This is the least you can do." Kyle stayed by the U-Haul, arms crossed, leaning against the side of the truck, smiling, relaxed, like the verdict was already in and he was just waiting for the paperwork. I looked at the 3 of them, my father on my walkway, my mother on my grass, my brother at my curb, and felt something shift inside my chest. Not anger, not sadness, something colder, something clearer. Mom turned to Mrs. Henderson across the street, raised her voice just enough. "I'm sorry you have to see this. My daughter is being very difficult. We're just trying to help her brother's children have a stable home." She was performing. Right there on my front lawn, in front of my neighbors, she was building the narrative. The selfless mother. The ungrateful daughter. The poor brother with his poor children. I set my coffee mug down on the porch railing. I stood up. I walked down the porch steps slowly. 3 steps. No rush. I stopped on the walkway, about 6 feet from my parents. Close enough to speak normally. Close enough to be heard by every neighbor standing within earshot. "This is my house." My voice was steady. I'd rehearsed nothing, but the words came out as though I'd been holding them for 34 years. "My name is on the deed. I paid for it with my own money. Not one person in this family contributed a single dollar." Dad's jaw tightened. "Don't you disrespect us." "Respect is a 2-way street, Dad. And you just drove a moving truck to my house without my permission." His face went red. Not embarrassment. Anger. Gerald Townsend was a man who gave orders. He didn't take them, and he certainly didn't get corrected by his youngest child on a public sidewalk. Kyle took a step forward. "Come on, Myra. Don't be like this." "Like what? Like someone who owns her own home?" He opened his mouth, closed it. He wasn't used to me pushing back. None of them were. For 34 years, I'd been the one who absorbed, the one who adjusted, the one who got over it. Mom folded her arms. "You're going to regret this, Myra. When you're old and alone and nobody calls, you'll think about today." Maybe. But today, I still have a house. And it's mine. Silence. The kind that presses on your skin. Janet stood on her own driveway, arms at her sides, watching. Mrs. Henderson hadn't moved from her porch. The Martinez couple stood by their minivan, the kids quiet in their car seats. Nobody on the street said a word, but everybody was listening. Dad reached into his pocket and pulled out a key. He walked past me toward the front door, like I wasn't standing there, like I hadn't just told him this was my house. He put the key in the lock and turned it. Nothing. Tried again. Nothing. Kyle jogged up behind him, pulling out his own key. The new one, the one that matched the lock he'd installed last Thursday. He pushed past Dad and tried it. It didn't work either. Dad stepped back, looked at the door, looked at me. Myra, you changed the locks? I changed them back, after your son changed them last Thursday. The air went still. Kyle's hand dropped to his side. He stared at the door like it had personally betrayed him. Dad's face cycled through 3 expressions in 2 seconds: confusion, recognition, and something that looked a lot like fear. Mom, still on the lawn. What are you talking about? Thursday, Mom. 2:14 in the afternoon. All 3 of you walked into my house. Kyle changed the deadbolt and the knob while Dad supervised. You brought a box of children's things and put them in my spare bedroom. I was at work. Nobody asked me. That's not... It's on camera. 3 words. I said them quietly. But the way my father's face went white, like the blood just drained straight through the soles of his boots, those 3 words hit harder than anything I'd ever said in my life. Kyle looked at Dad. Dad looked at the ground. Mom's mouth opened, then closed. Behind me, I heard Janet's voice from her driveway, calm and clear. I'd suggest you step off the porch now, Gerald. Nobody moved. The November wind pushed a few dead leaves across the lawn. The sound of them scraping the concrete was the loudest thing on the street. Dad recovered first. He straightened up, pulled his shoulders back, and fixed me with the look he'd used my entire childhood. The look that said, I am the father. This conversation is over. You're going to call the cops on your own father? I'm going to call the police on 3 people trespassing on my property. I pulled my phone from my back pocket, dialed 911. My thumb was steady. My voice was steady. The dispatch operator asked what the emergency was. I'm at 114 Maple Lane. 3 individuals are on my property with a moving truck. I've asked them to leave. They're refusing. Mom started crying. Not quiet tears. The full performance. Hands over her face, shoulders shaking. She turned toward Mrs. Henderson's porch and sobbed loud enough for the entire block to hear. How can you do this to us? We're your parents, Myra. We gave you life. Kyle kicked the porch step. This is insane. She's insane. Dad said nothing. His jaw was working, grinding side to side, but no words came out. He was doing the math. Cameras, locks changed, evidence. Down the street, 2 more neighbors had come outside. Mr. Padilla from 3 doors down, his teenage son behind him. A woman I'd seen but never met, standing at the end of her driveway in a bathrobe. Janet walked to the edge of her property, close to the low fence between our yards. She looked at me and spoke clearly, loud enough for all of them to hear. I saw everything, Myra. I'll give a statement if you need one. Mom snapped her head toward Janet. For 1 second, the tears stopped. Pure fury, quick as a flash, then buried under another sob. The operator told me a unit was on its way. Estimated arrival, 10 to 12 minutes. The longest 11 minutes of my life were about to start. While we waited, my mother went to work. She crossed the lawn to Mrs. Henderson's fence, tears still flowing, and clutched the older woman's hand through the slats. She's kicking out her own brother and his children, my grandchildren, Diane. They'll have nowhere to go. Her voice cracked at all the right moments. She'd rehearsed this grief, maybe not consciously, but Donna Townsend had spent a lifetime learning how to perform pain in a way that made other people feel guilty for not fixing it. Mrs. Henderson, Diane, looked uncomfortable. She patted my mother's hand, but didn't say anything. Gerald stood by his truck, arms crossed, jaw set. He hadn't spoken since the 911 call. He was watching me the way you'd watch a stranger, measuring, recalculating. Kyle pulled out his phone and called someone on speaker. Aunt Linda's voice blared across the lawn. "What do you mean she called the cops? On you?" "Aunt Linda," Kyle said, loud enough for the whole street. "Myra's calling the police on us for trying to move me and the kids into her empty house." A tinny voice through the speaker, sharp as a slap. "Myra, shame on you." I didn't respond. I stood on my porch and waited. Then Janet crossed the low fence and walked onto my lawn. She moved with the calm, deliberate pace of a woman who'd spent 40 years in courtrooms. She stopped in front of my mother. "Donna, I've been your neighbor for 12 years. Last week you told me, right here on this sidewalk, that Myra agreed to let Kyle move in, that she was happy about it." Janet paused. Let the words land. "She never agreed. You lied to my face." Mom's tears stopped. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. That was the first crack in the wall she'd built. The cruiser pulled up at 9:24, 2 officers. The first one out was a tall woman, Officer Reeves, according to her nameplate. She surveyed the scene in one slow sweep. U-Haul truck, Ford pickup, 3 adults on the lawn, 1 woman on the porch, a growing audience of neighbors, and a retired attorney standing in the middle of it all like a referee. Who called? I did. I stepped off the porch and met her on the walkway. "I'm the homeowner, Myra Townsend. These 3 people are my parents and my brother. I've asked them to leave. They won't." "Do you have proof of ownership?" I handed her the deed and my driver's license. She looked at both, compared the name and address, and handed them back. "Ma'am, you're the sole owner of this property." "Yes." She turned to my father. "Sir, the homeowner has asked you to leave. You need to leave." Dad's voice came out strained like he was holding something down. "Officer, this is a family matter. We're just trying to help my son find housing." "I understand, sir, but the property owner has the right to decide who enters her home. She's asked you to leave." Kyle stepped forward. "She's my sister. I just need a place for my kids." Officer Reeves held up a hand, firm but not unkind. "That doesn't change the property law. If the homeowner wants you off the property, you need to go." Mom collapsed onto the porch step, dramatically, one hand on her chest. "This is what she does. She turns everyone against us." Officer Reeves glanced at Mom, then at me. Her face was professionally neutral, but I caught something in her eyes. She'd seen this before. This exact scene, different names. "Ma'am," she said to my mother, "I need you to stand up and move to the sidewalk, please." My mother made one last attempt. Standing on the sidewalk now, mascara streaked, she pointed at me and raised her voice for everyone within 50 feet. "She invited Kyle to look at the house. She's lying. She agreed to this weeks ago." Officer Reeves looked at me. "Ma'am, do you have anything to add?" I unlocked my phone, pulled up the ring footage from last Thursday, handed it to Officer Reeves. "This was recorded at my home on Thursday at 2:14 p.m. I was at work. I never gave permission for anyone to enter." She pressed play. I watched her eyes track the screen. Gerald opening the front door. Kyle kneeling with a screwdriver and a new lock set. Donna stepping inside with a box of children's belongings. 12 minutes of unauthorized entry, every second time-stamped and clear. The second officer leaned over to watch. Neither of them spoke until the footage ended. Officer Reeves looked up at my father. Her voice was different now, still professional, but with an edge. "Sir, this footage shows you entering this property without the owner's consent and changing the locks. That could be considered criminal trespass and unauthorized entry." My father's face went white. The same bloodless white as when I'd said, "It's on camera." Except now there was a police officer saying it, and half the neighborhood watching. Kyle backed up 3 steps. He bumped into the U-Haul. Mom said nothing. For the first time in as long as I could remember, Donna Townsend had absolutely nothing to say. Janet, standing near the fence, spoke up. Officers, I'll provide a witness statement confirming that the homeowner never consented to any of this. I'm a retired attorney. Donna Townsend told me last week that Myra had agreed. That was false. The second officer pulled out a notepad. Officer Reeves gave them one final direction. I need all three of you to leave the property now. Take the truck. Kyle was the first to move. He closed the U-Haul gate without a word, climbed into the cab, and started the engine. He didn't look at me. He stared straight ahead through the windshield, like a man trying to disappear. Mom walked to Dad's truck on stiff legs. She opened the passenger door, climbed in, and pulled it shut so hard the whole vehicle rocked. Dad was the last one standing on my walkway. He looked at me, and for just a second, I saw something underneath the anger, something old and tired and lost. Then it was gone, replaced by the same hard mask he'd worn my entire life. He turned without a word and walked to his truck. Engine on. Reverse. Gone. I turned to Officer Reeves. I'd like to file a formal trespass warning. She nodded. We'll document everything, today's incident and the footage from last Thursday. You'll get a copy for your records. If any of them return without your explicit permission, we can pursue charges. Thank you. She handed me a card and left. The street went quiet. The neighbors drifted back inside, one by one. Mr. Padilla gave me a nod. Mrs. Henderson stood on her porch for a long moment, then went in. The Martinez couple finished loading their kids into the minivan, and before she got in the driver's seat, Sophia Martinez looked at me and mouthed, "You okay?" I nodded. Janet walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing, Myra." I thanked her, went inside, locked the door behind me, walked to the couch, sat down on the floor in front of it, and cried. I didn't cry because I lost my family. I cried because I finally saw what they'd always been. I need to catch my breath here. That Saturday, that was the hardest day I've had in a long time. But I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping yourself? Because that's what it comes down to. Drop a comment, just one word. Peace or self. Let me know where you landed. And if this is hitting close to home, share this with someone who needs to hear it. They won't get this from a self-help book. They'll get it from a story. Okay. The next part is what happened at my dad's birthday party. The very next day, Sunday morning. I woke up at 5, stared at the ceiling, and had the same argument with myself for 2 hours straight. Don't go, stay home. Let them tell whatever story they want. But I knew what would happen if I stayed home. Mom would stand in that church hall surrounded by 40 people and deliver the version of events where I was the villain. She'd say I called the police on my own parents. She'd leave out the locks. She'd leave out the footage. She'd leave out the U-Haul and the spare key and the phrase, "She'll get over it." She always does. If I wasn't there, her version would become the only version. And in a town like Ridgewood, the first story people hear is the one they believe. I got dressed, navy blouse, slacks, my good boots. I looked professional because I am professional, and because I knew my mother would be watching for any sign of weakness. Messy hair, red eyes, wrinkled clothes, and she'd use it. I put the deed copy in my bag, checked my phone battery, 92%, footage loaded, AirPlay ready. Rob's voice in my head. If they lie, you have the truth. Janet texted at 8. You don't have to go. I replied. I know, that's why I'm going. The church hall was a 10-minute drive. Fellowship Hall, cinder block walls painted cream, fluorescent lights, folding tables with paper tablecloths. A banner across the back wall reading, "Happy Birthday, Gerald," in blue and gold. Paper plates. A sheet cake from the bakery on Main. 30, maybe 40 people. Family, church friends, a few neighbors. My world, compressed into one room. I didn't go to make peace. I went because silence is how they win. The moment I walked through the door, I felt it. That subtle temperature drop when a room full of people has already been told a story about you. Aunt Linda was pouring lemonade at the refreshment table. She saw me, set the pitcher down, and turned her back. Uncle Steve, standing near the cake, gave me the kind of nod you'd give a toll booth worker, obligatory and brief. Cousin Rachel started toward me, then stopped when she saw Aunt Linda's expression. She looked down at her plate and stayed where she was. The room wasn't hostile exactly. It was polished, rehearsed. Everyone had their position, and mine was clear. I was the daughter who called the cops. Mom sat at the head table with Kyle. She wore her Sunday best, a cream cardigan with a gold cross necklace, the one she only wears when she wants people to remember she's a woman of faith. Kyle sat beside her, Emma on his lap, Liam on the other side coloring a placemat with crayons. The picture of a devoted father, a man in need, an innocent man wronged by his own sister. Pastor David Greenfield crossed the room and shook my hand. He smelled like aftershave and chalk. His handshake was warm, but his eyes were careful. Glad you could make it, Myra. Not good to see you, not happy you're here. Glad you could make it. Like my attendance was a favor, not a given. I sat down at an empty table near the back wall. A folding chair. A paper plate with nothing on it. Kyle walked past me on his way to the coffee station. He leaned close, just enough for me to hear. You really showed up? After what you did? I looked straight ahead. After what I did. He walked away. I sat alone and waited. After the opening prayer, Mom stood up. She held a plastic cup of punch and a folded piece of paper. Her hands were steady. She'd done this 100 times. Speeches at church suppers, eulogies, holiday blessings. Donna Townsend owned a room when she wanted to. I want to thank everyone for being here to celebrate Gerald. 40 years of marriage, 3 beautiful grandchildren, a lifetime of putting family first. She paused, looked around the room with soft eyes, the kind of look that says, I'm about to share something painful, and I need you to hold me up. This year has been hard for our family. Gerald and I have always tried to take care of all our children equally. We've tried to teach them that family comes first. She swallowed. But sometimes one child forgets what family means. She looked directly at me. Every head in the room followed. I sat still. My hands were flat on the table. My heart was hammering, but my face gave nothing away. 8 years on construction sites, managing crews, handling inspectors and foremen and clients who wanted to scream. You learn how to hold a room with your posture alone. When your own daughter calls the police on you, her voice cracked beautifully. When she refuses to help her brother's children have a stable home, it breaks a mother's heart. A murmur rippled through the room. Aunt Linda pressed a napkin to her eyes. Uncle Steve shook his head slowly. A woman from the church choir put her hand over her mouth. Mom sat down. Dad reached over and squeezed her hand. The room looked at me with the particular pity reserved for the person who has disappointed everyone. She'd finished. The room had its villain. And that's when I stood up. The chair made a sound when I pushed it back. A sharp scrape against the tile floor. 40 sets of eyes locked onto me. I walked to the center of the room, not to the front table, to the center, where everyone could see me. I love my father. Happy birthday, Dad. I meant it. My voice was calm. But I need everyone in this room to hear the truth. Because what you just heard wasn't all of it. Mom's hand went to Dad's arm. A warning grip. I bought my house 2 years ago, with my own money, my own savings, my own mortgage. No one in this family contributed a cent. I unzipped my bag and held up the deed copy. This is the deed, my name, sole owner. The room was silent. Not the polite silence of a church crowd. The airless silence of people realizing they're in the middle of something bigger than a birthday party. Last Thursday, while I was at my job, my parents and my brother entered my home without my permission. Kyle changed my door locks. My dad supervised. My mom brought a box of children's belongings and set them up in my spare bedroom. None of them asked me. None of them had my consent. I opened my phone. The footage was already cued. I walked to the AV cart in the corner, the one the church uses for Sunday school slideshows, and cast my phone to the mounted TV screen. The room watched Gerald open the front door, Kyle kneel with a screwdriver, Donna carry a box down the hallway, timestamp, date, clear as daylight. 40 people held their breath for 12 minutes. Aunt Linda slowly put down her lemonade. Uncle Steve's mouth was open. Pastor David stared at the screen without moving. Dad's face was white. Again. The same terrible white. Mom looked at me. "You're twisting everything." I held her gaze. "The camera doesn't twist anything, Mom." The silence after the footage was louder than anything my mother had ever said in that room. Pastor David turned away from the screen. He was a soft-spoken man, mid-60s, wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of voice that calmed people down during funerals. But his expression now was something I'd never seen on his face. "Gerald, is this true?" My father said nothing. He sat in his folding chair with his hands on the table, staring at the paper plate in front of him. The sheet cake behind him was still uncut. "Happy birthday," piped in blue frosting. Mom tried to salvage it. "We were just looking at the house for Kyle. We were trying to help." Janet stood up. She'd been sitting near the door. She knew people in this church, attended the occasional potluck. Nobody expected her to be here, and nobody expected her to speak. "I was there yesterday when the police came. I gave a witness statement." Gerald, Donna, and Kyle arrived at Myra's home with a U-Haul truck and attempted to move Kyle in without Myra's knowledge or consent. She paused. "And Donna, you told me personally on the sidewalk that Myra had agreed to this arrangement. That was a lie." The room shifted. I could feel it, like a tide reversing. Aunt Linda, the same woman who'd texted me "shame on you" through Kyle's speakerphone, turned toward my mother. "Donna, you told me Myra agreed." Mom's lips pressed together. She didn't answer. "You told me she was happy about it," Aunt Linda continued, her voice climbing. "I sent messages to this girl, terrible messages, because you told me she was being difficult after she'd already said yes." Kyle stood up. He picked up Liam and grabbed Emma's hand. "I'm leaving." He walked out the side door without looking back. Dad hadn't moved. He sat in his chair like a man waiting for the floor to open. The party didn't end with candles and singing. It ended with people standing up slowly, collecting their coats, and leaving without looking at each other. The sheet cake sat on the table, whole and untouched. Someone turned off the overhead lights. Pastor David walked my parents to the parking lot. I don't know what he said to them. The week that followed was quiet, in the way a house is quiet after a storm. Not peaceful, just empty of noise. Monday. I filed the formal trespass warning at the Ridgewood Police Department. Officer Reeves processed the paperwork. My parents' names and Kyle's were entered into the system. Public record. In a town of 9,000 people, that kind of document has a half-life of about 6 hours before everyone at the grocery store knows. Tuesday. Pastor David called Gerald and Donna for a private meeting at the church. I wasn't there, and no one told me what was said. But the following Sunday, my parents sat in the back row instead of their usual spot in the third pew. That told me enough. Wednesday, Aunt Linda called me. She cried for the first 4 minutes. Then she said, "I should have asked you directly. I believed your mother. I'm sorry." I told her I appreciated the call. I didn't say it was okay, because it wasn't okay yet. Thursday, Kyle submitted an application for a studio apartment through the county's affordable housing program. He qualified. First time in his life, he'd filled out his own paperwork. Friday, Mom texted me. It was long, 4 paragraphs. I read every word. She did not apologize. Instead, she wrote, "You humiliated your father on his birthday. In front of our church. In front of our community. I hope you're proud of yourself." I read it once. Then I locked my phone. "No, Mom. You humiliated yourselves. I just showed the room." 2 weeks later, my phone rang at 8 p.m. on a Tuesday. Dad's number. I almost didn't pick up. "Hello?" He cleared his throat twice before speaking. His voice sounded different, thinner, like a man who hadn't slept well in a while. I'm not calling to apologize. I don't I don't know how to do that. I leaned against the kitchen counter and waited. I just I thought I was helping your brother. He lost his wife. He lost his house. He was on my couch every night watching TV until 2 in the morning, and I kept thinking, if he had a place, a real place, he'd pull himself together. He'd be the father those kids need. And my house was the solution. You have 3 bedrooms, Myra. I earned those 3 bedrooms, Dad. A long pause. I could hear him breathing. I could hear the TV in the background, some evening news anchor, a weather report, the sounds of my parents' living room, the place where I was never quite first priority. I know, he said finally. I know you did. Another pause, longer this time. I thought you'd understand, because you've always been the strong one. There it was, the thing that held our entire family dynamic in place. Myra is strong. Myra can handle it. Myra doesn't need what Kyle needs. Give to Kyle because he's struggling. Take from Myra because she'll survive. Being the strong one isn't a reason to take from me, Dad. His breathing went ragged. Not crying. Gerald Townsend didn't cry. But something close, something straining behind the walls he'd built his whole life. I know that too. I love you, Dad, but I can't trust you right now. I know. The call ended. No goodbye, no promises, nothing resolved. Just 2 people who loved each other and couldn't figure out how to say it without one of them losing something. That weekend, I sat down at my kitchen table and wrote an email. I sent it to the family group chat, the same one Mom had used to broadcast her version of events. Every cousin, every aunt, every uncle. I kept it short, professional, the kind of language I use on project reports, clear, direct, no filler. I love this family, I always have, but moving forward, I'm setting 3 boundaries that are non-negotiable. 1. My home is my home. No one enters without my explicit advance permission. 2. I will not discuss my property, finances, or living arrangement with anyone in this family. Those topics are closed. 3. I am open to rebuilding trust. But trust is rebuilt through actions, not words. I've heard a lot of words over the past few weeks. I'll be watching for actions. I read it twice, pressed send, closed the laptop. The replies came in over the next few days. Aunt Linda responded with a short message. I understand, Myra. I'm here if you need me. Uncle Steve sent a thumbs-up emoji, which from him was practically a standing ovation. Cousin Rachel texted privately. For what it's worth, I heard the whole story from Janet at church. I should have called you sooner. Kyle replied in the group chat, one word. Fine. It was the first time in his life he hadn't argued. Something had shifted in Kyle. I didn't know what yet, and I wasn't going to give him credit for one word. But fine from Kyle Townsend, with no excuses and no blame, was a small earthquake. Mom replied 48 hours later. This is cold, Myra. Dad didn't reply at all. But I checked. He didn't delete the email either. I closed the laptop and made dinner. Chicken, roasted potatoes, green beans. A meal for one. My meal. In my house. The following Saturday, Janet showed up at my door with a peach cobbler still warm from the oven. You handled that better than most lawyers I know, she said, handing me the dish. And I know a lot of lawyers. I laughed. It felt strange. My face had to remember how. We ate cobbler on my porch. She told me about her rose garden plans for spring. I told her about the retaining wall project I was managing at work. Normal things, small things, the kind of conversation that happens between people who've been through something together and have decided, without saying it, to keep going. Tuesday evening, there was a knock. Mrs. Henderson, Diane, stood on my porch holding a bottle of wine and a nervous expression. I just want you to know, I told my daughter about what happened. She's been going through something similar with her in-laws. They've been pressuring her about her house ever since her divorce. She held out the wine. She asked me to thank you. For what? For standing up. She said she didn't think people actually did that. I took the wine. Tell her they do. The next morning, I found a card tucked into my mailbox. No stamp, hand-delivered, from Sofia and Marco Martinez. Respect. Your house, your rules. We're glad you're our neighbor. I stuck it on the refrigerator with a magnet. That evening, I sat on the porch. The air was cold, but I brought a blanket and my coffee, and I stayed out until the streetlights came on. For the first time in weeks, I didn't check my phone to see if my parents had called. I didn't refresh the group chat. I didn't rehearse arguments in my head. I just sat there, in front of my house, on my porch, breathing. 3 months passed. Kyle kept the studio apartment. He didn't love it. 200 square feet, a kitchenette the size of a closet, and a view of the parking lot behind a laundromat. But it was his. First lease with only his name on it. First rent check drawn from a bank account only he controlled. He got a job at Cartwright's Auto Repair on Route 9. Not glamorous, oil changes, brake jobs, tire rotations. But he showed up every day, 5 days a week, 4 weeks straight, then 8, then 12. His boss, Dale Cartwright, told someone at the hardware store that Kyle was the most reliable guy he'd had in years. Word gets around in Ridgewood. It got to me through Janet. Heather noticed. She started letting Kyle pick up Emma and Liam on Friday evenings instead of Saturday mornings. An extra night, every other week. Kyle bought them a set of bunk beds from the thrift store on Franklin. He put them together himself, which was, according to Heather, a first. Mom never apologized, but she stopped texting me the long guilt paragraphs. The group chat went quiet. No more prayer requests, no more public performances. The silence wasn't forgiveness, but it was the absence of attack. I'd take it. Dad sent me a photo in February. No caption, no message, just a picture of a wooden bookshelf he'd built in his garage. Dovetail joints, walnut stain, 3 shelves, the kind of work he used to do before his back got bad. He was a builder. I was a builder. We'd never once talked about that, the thing we shared, the thing that made us the same. I didn't reply right away, but I saved the photo. Aunt Linda invited me to lunch the following week. First time a family member outside my parents had reached out voluntarily. She asked me how I was doing. She actually listened. It's Sunday afternoon, March. The kind of day where winter is almost done, arguing with spring, and the light through the trees is soft and patient. I'm sitting on my porch, the one I repainted last summer. The coffee in my mug is still warm. The camera above the front door is blinking its tiny blue light, doing what it always does, watching, recording, keeping track. The door is locked. It's always locked now. That used to make me sad. Now it just makes me careful. I used to think that being loved meant being needed. That if I was useful enough, reliable enough, invisible enough, they'd finally see me. I rearranged my entire life around that belief. I worked harder. I asked for less. I kept the peace so many times that I forgot what my own voice sounded like when it wasn't apologizing. They didn't see me. They saw a resource, a spare bedroom, a backup plan, a daughter who would get over it because she always did. So I stopped getting over it, and I started getting honest. I'm not going to tell you that everything is fixed. My mom hasn't called in 6 weeks. My dad sends photos of woodworking projects and never writes a word. Kyle and I exchange a text on holidays, short, polite, careful. We're not enemies. We're just not what we were. And I am not who I was. If your family is asking you to shrink so someone else can expand, that's not love. That's real estate. And you are not a house to be given away. This is my porch, my coffee, my quiet Sunday. This is my home. That's my story. Or at least, the part I'm ready to tell. If you made it to the end, you already know what this feeling is like. The feeling of choosing yourself over someone else's plan for you. I have one question. What's the boundary you wish you'd set sooner? Tell me in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, about people who chose themselves when nobody else would, check the description below. There's a whole collection waiting for you. Thank you for being here. It means more than you know.